On today's episode of The Franchise, we have the NFL free agency recap as the first 2 days of the NFL free agency are underway. Got a lot of signings and trades to go over, as well as arguably the biggest trade of the offseason so far, the Panthers trading up with the Bears to get the number one overall pick. And we're going to do the NFL mock draft 2.0 with the updated draft order. No trades outside of the original outside of this Panthers to number one trade. No other trades, no mock trades in this mock draft. Before we get into it, franchise available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Let's start with the Panthers trading up to number one overall pick. On Friday, after we finished the podcast, literally like 30 minutes later, the Panthers traded up with the Bears to get the number one overall pick. And Chicago got a very, very, very good package in return. They get the number 9 overall pick, the number 61 overall pick. That's a second rounder, a first round pick in 2024, a second round pick in 2025, and wide receiver DJ Moore, who is arguably one of the most underrated wide receivers in the game. He's an absolute beast and has been one of the best players at that wide receiver position for the past few seasons now. And he's going to the Bears. And the Bears load up and they get a perfect haul for that number one overall pick. And, you know, we've been talking about the Bears trading this pick for a few months now, ever since the draft order was finalized. And we found out that Chicago had the first overall pick for a team that kind of already has a franchise quarterback in Justin Fields in a draft class that has 4 potential top 10 pick quarterbacks. It didn't make sense for the Bears to draft a quarterback and to retain and hold on to the number one overall pick. It made sense for them, not only from that standpoint, but also their team. They're a team that does not need just one player to be really good. They need a lot of pieces on that team, and the best way for them to improve would to be to trade back and get more assets, and that's exactly what they did. They get a true number one wide receiver for Justin Fields and DJ Moore, and then they're also able to still get a guy at 9, still get a guy in the second round. And then you have two first round picks next year and 2 second round picks the year after that. So Chicago gets an absolutely great haul for that number one overall pick. And then for the Panthers, they trade a lot. They trade DJ Moore, so they have really no wide receivers currently on their roster, but they finally get to solve the problem of having a franchise quarterback. After years of Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, PJ Walker, Teddy Bridgewater, and Cam Newton, they finally have the potential to draft a guy number 1 overall to be their franchise quarterback. Now, there's really 2 options. There might be 3, but I think there's really 2 routes that the Panthers go with this first overall pick. That's drafting either C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young to be the quarterback of the future. A lot of people are saying Young, a lot of people are saying Stroud. So it's kind of an even split right now of who the projected number 1 overall pick will be to the Panthers. If you look at Frank Reich, who is the new Panthers head coach, the quarterbacks he's had in his past have all been the mold of C.J. Stroud. 6'6", X weight, strong arm, pocket presence, not super mobile. That has really been the mold of quarterbacks that Frank Reich has had on his team. So C.J. Stroud seems to be the favorite, but then again, a lot of people are saying it could be Bryce Young, and then there's those few people out there that are saying Anthony Richardson from Florida could be the number 1 overall pick in this draft. Now, I don't really know about that. I do see him going top 10 for sure, but in terms of who I think will be the number 1 overall pick to the Panthers, we'll get to that in a little bit when we do this mock draft, but Panthers get that number 1 overall pick. They could still potentially move back. There's been some talk of that. I don't really see that happening. I think they traded up this high for their guy. They want to make sure that they get him, whether it's Stroud, Young, Richardson, maybe even Will Levis. They're going to draft that guy with the number 1 overall pick, as they believe they have found their franchise quarterback. And Chicago gets an absolutely great haul. They're going to be able to build that roster out, and they've already done that in free agency, which we'll get to right now. All right, so what else happened? We have NFL free agency has started, is well underway, and then we have some trades that have happened. And one of the biggest trades so far this offseason has been Jalen Ramsey to the Miami Dolphins. Now, Ramsey, there's been a decent amount of talk since the start of the offseason about him departing from the Rams. The Rams, millions of dollars under the salary cap, removed from 2 years ago winning a Super Bowl. They had a very poor, horrible down season last year, missed out on the playoffs. And now, with no draft picks, no cap space, they're looking to find ways to improve this roster. And Jalen Ramsey, with his $32 million guaranteed, I think it is, over the next 2 seasons, doesn't really fit the timetable that the Rams have sent. So they send him to the Dolphins. There was talk about the Cowboys, maybe even the Bears, the Colts. There was a good amount of teams with talk about Jalen Ramsey being a fit there. He goes to the Dolphins, and they only give up a third-round pick and a tight end back to the Rams. So the Dolphins have a very nice squad when you look at it now. They have Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey at that cornerback position. Obviously, they brought in Bradley Chubb at the trade deadline, and then the offensive side of the ball with Hill, Waddle, Gesicki, and then Tua at that quarterback position. The Dolphins have a lot of stars. They have a great head coach. They obviously made the postseason last year. I think this team's definitely improved so far this offseason. Also bouncing around, the Raiders made some moves. They made a lot of moves. In fact, they made a few moves today on Tuesday. The first one they did on Monday. They brought in Jimmy Garoppolo from the 49ers. They signed him 3 years, $67.5 million, $34 million guaranteed. So he's going to be the Derek Carr replacement. I still think the Raiders are going to go out there and draft a quarterback in the first round, whether it's at 7 or if they ultimately trade up to 3 to 5 to 6. I think they'll draft a quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo is a good starter. He's taken teams to the playoffs, taken his team to the Super Bowl. But he's not the long-term answer at quarterback for this team. And if they want to have sustained success over the next 10 years, they need to go out there and draft a quarterback in this draft class. Now, personally, as someone who is a Raiders fan, you don't have to draft a quarterback this season. Now, I think they will, but you could ride it out with Jimmy Garoppolo and then next season try and go all in on a Caleb Williams. That is what I would do. I'm not drafting a quarterback in this year's draft if I don't have to. I would wait till next year. But I think the Raiders will draft a guy at that quarterback position in this year's draft in the first round. But Jimmy Garoppolo will be there, most likely be the starter next season, and most likely the starter the year after that. But that third year, not a lot of guaranteed money on it. That is when you could be looking at whatever potential draft pick the Raiders do select at that quarterback position. That's when you could see him play. The Raiders also brought in a few weapons here. They brought in Jacoby Myers, wide receiver from the Patriots, 3 years, $21 million guaranteed. So before we get to this next piece of news, this Raiders team is actually looking pretty nice. Jimmy Garoppolo, Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Jacoby Myers, Josh Jacobs at that running back position, and then Darren Waller at tight end. But then Darren Waller got traded to the Giants for the 100th overall pick in the NFL draft. So Darren Waller, who, when you look at his guaranteed money, he doesn't have a lot of guaranteed money left. His cap hits in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it would be easy to cut him, easy to move on from him if he had another down season. Now, last year, very injured for Darren Waller. Didn't have a lot of time on the field. Very injury-riddled season. But when he's healthy, over the past 3 seasons, he's been one of the best tight ends in the NFL. So the fact that the Raiders traded him away for a third-round draft pick is just crazy, because he would have been he's a very important piece to this team. Whatever quarterback, if it's Jimmy Garoppolo, if it's whatever other guy they draft, and if he gets an opportunity to play this year, if you have Adams, Renfrow, Myers, Jacobs, and Darren Waller, there's a lot of weapons for that quarterback to play with on offense. And moving him out for a third-round pick, when Darren Waller, 1, wasn't looking for a new contract, 2, was already under contract. And I still think he has good football left in him. He's only 31 at that tight end position, one of the best tight ends in the NFL when he's healthy and on the field, and they only get a third-round pick back for him. So in terms of the Giants making this move, they get Darren Waller. That is a great pickup. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, Darren Waller, If they can go out there and add a true number one receiver, Odell Beckham Jr., DeAndre Hopkins, they're going to be a really nice a team, especially offensively. The Giants are. But the Raiders, they bring in Myers, but they let go of Darren Waller. Also bring in Jimmy G as well. Shaq Mason got traded to the Texans from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so he's going to help out that offensive line. It's a nice pickup for Houston. They've made a good amount of moves over the past few days. They also brought in Jimmy Ward, the corner from San Francisco, follows his former defensive coordinator, now head coach of the Texans down there in Houston. Allen Lazard is apparently going to the New York Jets. We'll get to that one in a minute because there's a lot of talk around the Jets over these past few weeks, few days, especially. Jesse Bates, one of the best safeties in the NFL, is going to the Falcons on a 4-year, $65 million deal. $23 million of that is in the first year of the contract, 36 over the next 2. The Bears bring in Tremaine Edmonds from the Buffalo Bills, $50 million guaranteed for Tremaine Edmonds, one of the best linebackers in the league. So Chicago's made a lot of moves so far. I mean, Justin Fields, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, and then you add Tremaine Edmonds in that linebacker position on the defensive side of the ball. And we'll see who they draft at that 9th overall pick. I think he'll definitely be a defensive player for sure. And this Bears team, they've made a lot of moves this offseason, and they're so far looking to be some good moves for sure. Let's see, anything else before we get to the New York Jets. So Allen Lazard reportedly has agreed to a deal with the Jets. And what's interesting about this is because we're still waiting on Aaron Rodgers to make a decision. Now, last week, Friday, on that episode, I said we'll most likely figure out what Aaron Rodgers is going to do over the weekend. Well, it is Tuesday, and we still have no idea if he's going to retire or if he's going to play football, and that most likely being for the New York Jets. Because whatever Aaron Rodgers, if he decides to retire, it's over, right? But if he decides to play football, he is not going back to the Packers. He's already met with the Jets. The Packers president or GM has said that Aaron Rodgers had a good time here. His number will be retired. He's had a great time as a Packer. Basically saying Aaron Rodgers, if he decides to play next season, will be on the New York Jets. For the Packers, they have to play Jordan Love. That's a whole nother issue. But for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets have been waiting on Aaron Rodgers. They passed on Derek Carr. They passed on Jimmy Garoppolo. They are banking their entire quarterback position and all of next season on them getting Aaron Rodgers. We don't know if he is going to play or if he is going to retire, but if he does play, and apparently there's been where was it? His Aaron Rodgers wish list for if he was to go play for the New York Jets. He wants Mercedes Lewis, tight end, Randall Cobb, a wide receiver, Allen Lazard, who apparently has agreed to a deal there, or Odell Beckham Jr. So he wants some of those guys to join the Jets if he is to ultimately decide to go and play there. Now, like I said, we still don't know what he's going to do, right? If he decides to retire, the Jets have missed out. They've lost the offseason, and they're going to have to run it back with either Zach Wilson or maybe they decide to get crazy and draft a quarterback this year. But they really need to be able – they need to get Aaron Rodgers. I think he will go there. I don't think he's going to retire. I think he will play. But we're still waiting, to figure out what he is going to do. If he's going to go to the Jets or not. The Jets already have a great roster. They have a top 5 defense. And if they add Aaron Rodgers to that offense with a good offensive line, Garrett Wilson, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Breece Hall coming back from his ACL injury at that running back position, Allen Lazard, potentially, Randall Cobb, Odell Beckham Jr. They already have Elijah Moore on that team. CJ Uzmoka, I think, at that tight end position. Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, I think, is going to happen. I mean, we're just waiting on Aaron Rodgers to officially make his decision on whether or not he's going to play football again next season. All right, let's get to that NFL Mock Draft 2.0 with the new draft order with the Panthers trading up to the number 1 overall pick. Now, I'm not going to do We're not doing any mock trades. We're just keeping it with the NFL draft order as it currently is right now. Top 10 style, only the top 10 picks. Not going to do the full mock draft just yet. NFL Mock Draft 2.0, top 10, no mock trades. Number 1 overall pick to the Carolina Panthers after they traded up with the Bears. I'm going to have them taking C.J. Stroud. Now, in the last mock draft, I had the Colts trading up. I think C.J. Stroud, I've said it for like a few months now, that C.J. Stroud, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in this draft. His arm talent, his accuracy, his height, his weight, his build. He is the perfect quarterback in this draft class. Now, he might not be as mobile as a Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson for sure, but his ability to throw that deep ball and throw it accurately and to make big game-changing plays, I think is the best out of any quarterback in this draft class, going to Carolina to be their franchise quarterback at that number 1 overall selection. Number 2, the Texans. I still have them taking Bryce Young from Alabama to be their quarterback. They've made a lot of moves this offseason, and you know, there's always been that talk of, especially over the last few weeks, of them potentially not drafting a quarterback. Now, they have Davis Mills. They were in on Jimmy Garoppolo. I think they are going to go the route of drafting a quarterback. Will the Texans be a top 5, a team that has a top 5 pick next season? I truly believe so. I don't think they're going to be that much better in 2023, but in a draft class that has 4 quarterbacks potentially going in the top 10, it makes too much sense for them being at number 2. I mean, they have to take a quarterback here. I think it's Bryce Young. I think he's easily the second best quarterback in this class, despite his height, despite his weight, his arm accuracy, his elusiveness in the pocket, his game management, his ability to push the ball downfield and make plays when it matters most. I think is some of the best at that quarterback position. I have him going number 2 to Houston. Number 3, Arizona Cardinals, Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama, one of the, if not the best, defensive player in the draft class, especially at that linebacker position. Him going to Arizona, they need to shore up that defense. If I was doing mock trades, I think this is a prime spot where where Arizona and the Cardinals, they trade back to one of these quarterback needy teams. In a real scenario, I could see, you know, a team like the Raiders, a team like the Falcons, a team like the Colts jumping up to number 3 to secure their bid at one of these top 4 quarterbacks. But in this one, with just doing no trades, no mock trades at least, I have them taking Will Anderson Jr. This Cardinals team needs a lot. They need an offensive line. They need offensive weapons. But their defense is pretty bad as well. So I have them taking one of the best defensive players in this draft. All right, number 4, to the Colts, I have Will Levis from Kentucky. Why do I have Levis over Richardson? I think I have Levis over Richardson because of his... I think Richardson's going to be a better player, but in terms of Levis, I think he's probably more NFL ready than Anthony Richardson. So him going to the Colts, a team that needs a quarterback, he fits the Indianapolis Colts type of quarterback. You know, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, all of the Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. He fits that stereotypical Colts quarterback. I think he'll be great with his arm strength and the touch that he has on that football in Indianapolis with the Colts. Michael Pittman Jr., Jonathan Taylor on that offense for him. You could put Anthony Richardson here. I think he will fall just a little bit because he's kind of more of a project player in terms of at that quarterback position compared to Will Levis. So I have him going number 4. It could definitely be Anthony Richardson here to the Colts, but they will most definitely be taking a quarterback. Number 5 overall to the Seahawks, I have Jalen Carter. I think he's the best defensive player in this draft, but with the recent off-the-field issues, I think he will slide a little bit. Now, going from projected number 1 overall pick in some mock drafts to sliding down to 5 isn't really, you know, a huge fall. But Seattle getting Jalen Carter, I think that would be one of the best pickups in this draft to a Seattle team that already has a pretty solid defense. Adding an elite pass rusher like Jalen Carter would be an absolute game changer for Seattle. All right, number 6 to the Lions. I have them taking Devon Witherspoon, the cornerback from Illinois, one of the best corners. I think he's the best corner in this draft class. one of the best tacklers at that position as well. Going to Detroit to shore up that secondary and one of the worst defenses in the league in Detroit, he should help them as they look to make a postseason run next season. Number 7 overall pick, I have the Raiders taking Anthony Richardson. This is the guy that I want the Raiders to take. Obviously, if they traded up to number 1, I'd want them to take C.J. Stroud, but with that not looking like it's going to become a possibility, I think Anthony Richardson is the next guy that the Raiders are going to have to take at that quarterback position. I don't want Will Levis. I don't think Will Levis is going to be as great as people project him to be. Now, Anthony Richardson, like a month and a half ago, I wasn't really high on this guy. I didn't understand all of the hype. But after you watch his games, now, Florida was not a great team last season, and Richardson definitely had a lot of bad moments. He wasn't the best passer last season, and sometimes he just wasn't able to get the job done. But his skill set, his talent projects really, really well, and I think he has the potential to be one of the best players in this draft class if everything goes right. Now, to the Raiders, Josh McDaniels gets his quarterback to build around. Obviously, he'd probably sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo for at least a season. But the Raiders drafting a quarterback, they need to, and I think they will. I have them taking Anthony Richardson, number 7. Number 8, the Falcons, Christian Gonzalez, corner out of Oregon. He's one of the best corners in this draft class. The Falcons, if they don't, it doesn't seem like they're going to take a quarterback. They're riding out Desmond Ridder. They just signed Taylor Heineke. So they're not going to take a quarterback, which is a little surprising. Maybe they'll wait till next season, or maybe Desmond Ridder is their quarterback. Maybe he is the guy for the Falcons, but I'm going to have them taking Gonzalez. They added Jesse Bates. They could use a corner on that defense. They could also use, maybe a wide receiver to pair with Drake London and Kyle Pitts. But the Falcons have nice pieces on that team. I would definitely look at a quarterback if I was Atlanta, but with that not looking like a possibility, I'll have them taking arguably the best corner in this draft class. All right, number 9, the Bears. I have them taking Tyree Wilson, the edge rusher from Texas A&M. They moved from 1 to 9. I still think they're going to get a great player for that defensive side of the ball. Obviously, they missed out on Jalen Carter and Will Anderson Jr., but I think Tyree Wilson's going to be a really, really great player in the NFL. An elite pass rusher out of Texas A&M, possesses a lot of skills, has a nice arsenal of pass rushing moves. I think he'll really help out Chicago and help shore up that defense. And then number 10 to the Eagles, I have Myles Murphy, edge rusher out of Clemson. The Eagles could go a lot of different ways. They could trade out. They could potentially, if a corner falls, if a Gonzalez or Witherspoon falls, they could draft that corner. The Eagles, like I said, they could trade back. They could draft a receiver, which there's been some mocks of receivers going to the Eagles. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown. They could go O-line. They could go D-line. They could go secondary. I have them going the edge rusher, Myles Murphy, out of Clemson here. So that's my NFL mock draft 2.0. Compared to the first one, the first one's a little, comparing these mock drafts is kind of weird because, of the trades. Now, I did do last mock draft. I actually did 2 technically. I did one with no trades and one with trades. But if you compare to the no trade mock draft to this no trade mock draft with the updated draft order, last week we had Jalen Carter going number 1, C.J. Stroud going number 2, Will Anderson Jr. going 3, Bryce Young going 4, Anthony Richardson going 5, Witherspoon 6, Levis 7, Wilson 8, Nolan Smith 9, and Christian Gonzalez 10. Look at it now. We have C.J. Stroud going number 1, Bryce Young number 2, Will Anderson Jr. number 3, Will Levis number 4, Jalen Carter number 5, Devon Witherspoon number 6, Anthony Richardson number 7, Christian Gonzalez number 8, Tyree Wilson number 9, and Myles Murphy number 10. So I do have some shakeups in this NFL draft. Now, this one's obviously without any mock trades. We'll definitely do another one with more trades. I bet there's going to be more draft movement as we get closer. Obviously, there will be. But we will do another mock draft, most likely next week with more trades. But that's going to do it for this episode. Slight NFL free agency recap. Still waiting on Aaron Rodgers to make his decision. Once he finally does that, we will be doing an episode. Panthers trading up to number 1 and NFL mock draft 2.0. We will be back tomorrow with NBA, NFL, whatever happens over these next 24 hours. And then we'll finish up that MLB divisional preview. Franchise available YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, TikTok in the description. Like, share, comment, subscribe. See y'all tomorrow.